Welcome to a podcast celebrating Scottish culture and entertainment, which is here to sing the praises of books, films, comedy, music, theatre, exhibitions, telly, poetry, and all that jazz. I'm Nicola Meehan. I'm an arts writer and broadcaster, and I'll give you the lowdown on what's coming up, what's happening now, what came before, and what we love, which is to say that every week I'm here to give you a kick up the arts. I'm joined every Thursday by brilliant guests in art spaces around the country, and this week I am thrilled to be in the company of two of our best loved writers and musicians. James Robertson is the Booker Prize nominated author of Scottish landmarks like the Testament of Gideon Mack, which is being adapted for theatre as we speak, and blindsiding State of the Nation epic and The Land Lay Still. His daily year-long writing challenge, or madness, call it what you will, 365, saw him create a short story with that exact number of words every day for 12 months, and that, in turn, galvanised fiddler and composer Aidan O'Rourke to create a musical response for every single one of them. And James's musical odysseys don't end there. He wrote a beautiful book about the Bard of Lochee, Michael Mara, Arrest This Moment. He reimagined Joni Mitchell's Hejira in Scots for a packed show at Glasgow Royal Concert Hall in 2016 as part of Celtic Connections. And he's also collaborated with the other equally lovely and quiet superstar who's with me on today's podcast. Andrew Mitchell, also known as Andrew Wasylyk, has variously played in the Hazy Janes and Idlewild with Michael Mara and Liz Lochhead. He's been nominated for the Scottish Album of the Year award several times, and his latest record, in cahoots with the artist and musician Tommy Perman, is a mesmerising and gently psychedelic trip called Ash Grey and the Gull Glides On. We recorded this at the brilliant V&A Dundee, and our conversation rose across the wonder of Liz Lochhead, Michael Mara, Karim Power and Aidan Moffat, not to mention the unsung Scots poet and Burns influencer Robert Ferguson, in a month that's going to pay tribute to him. And in between that, we talk about the distinctions between lyrics and poetry, and the fact that Andrew, before he came to meet us, put the bins out. You can't say we're not keeping it real here. I just got off the train from Stirling, and this is happening increasingly, I think, in Dundee. The sun was shining, and I'm pretty impressed, and I think part of that is because of this lovely seafront we've got here in Bonnie Dundee. Has it been sunny for you today, Andrew Wasylyk?
Yes, not initially when I was doing recycling. It was pretty overcast, which felt extremely stereotypical of a Monday. But once I left the house, the sky knew I was coming down here.
Came to the V&A.
Yeah.
I love the fact that we have this here now, James. You've been up this way for a while. I used to come up and see my dad every 3 weeks, and we would watch the V&A being built up and the skyline transforming and the sea front transforming. It's wild, isn't it, what's happened in the last few years?
It's amazing how the whole look of the city has changed. Mostly for the better, I think, although there's one or two buildings that I could wish that they hadn't put up, but that's it. But no, it's great to see it transformed, and it's great to see the city centre getting reconnected with the sea as well.
Yeah.
Because for a long time they didn't seem to connect, and now they do.
That's so true. They were very different places for a long time. I remember the first time I ever saw, if not met, Andrew Mitchell, aka Wasylyk, was not so far from here actually. It was in another legendary Dundee venue. I think it was under the Tay Hotel, and it was called the Purple Rooms. Do you remember that?
I remember those years vividly.
This is decades ago.
Yeah, like a lot of us when we were still at school, we used to go to the Dugout Bar.
Yes, the Dugout, that's right.
I don't remember that, but yeah, I mean, that was a really amazing time. We saw so many incredible acts at the upstairs in the Purple Rooms. DJ Crush and Black Alicious.
Amazing,
yeah,
in Dundee.
So many.
Yeah,
I don't know that side of Dundee life very well, because I've never lived in Dundee at all. Been in and out of Dundee quite a bit, but I've always had that sense when you come into the city that there is stuff going on just slightly on the margins, slightly out of sight. And whereas you go to Glasgow, it's kind of there in your face, but in Dundee you kind of have to look for it a wee bit more, maybe.
Yeah.
So when was the first time you came into this building, Andrew? You played, in fact, at the opening bash, didn't you?
Yeah, I played at the opening in Slessor Gardens. Actually, was lucky enough to play with my own band, and then I did a set with Gary Clark. I think I was basically Jed Grimes' Depp. You know, it's like the big shoes, big
I
beaks
was
to
there
fill.
and you rocked it.
Oh, thanks, pal. Yeah, that was a really, really fun afternoon. It was very, very beautiful, and it's been amazing seeing the kind of, you know, the evolution of the place. And I think we did another thing recently, which was like the birthday party celebration here in the building, and we played with the brilliant B Charlotte, and and broadly speaking, like, I think the building's been really positive for the city, and particularly when Leonie Bell, director, came in, it really felt like trying, you know, their best to kind of integrate with the community, and that's
Totally.
that's a you know, it's a really difficult job.
I think that's something they've really done. I'm thinking, James, about some of the exhibitions that I've been at over the years in here. There was the tartan one. There's at the moment it's kimonos, but one of my favourite was Night Fever. So this was designing clubbing, and it did have, along with the sort of worldwide global posters and paraphernalia of clubbing, it had kind of local flyers, and I love all that aspect of it. Or with the Radio 1 Big Weekend exhibition, it does seem to bring the community in. It's not just design as a sort of global concept. So Andrew, we're going to talk about your new album with Tommy Perman, among loads of other things over the next little while, but I thought we might talk about another collaboration first, seeing as it features someone else who's round the table, and thank goodness for everybody that person is not me. Art of the Memory Palace, you sent me a cassette, I think, back in the day of it, and who's on it, or just afterwards? James Robertson. How did that come about?
Well, I think initially, I mean, James, keep me right here, but I think Raz Ullah, my partner in Art of the Memory Palace, we invited you to write some sleeve notes for the cassette, based around the title of the album, This Life Is But a Passing Dream, which you very kindly accepted, and I think we were so taken with what you'd written and the words and how it turned out. After that album, we then kind of built a whole new piece of music to accompany the story, which in itself turned into a whole other, you know.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much how I remember it as well. And it was, you know, you and I knew each other through Michael Mara and Hazy Janes and that. But I think I was also experimenting. I'd worked with a couple of other musicians by that stage.
Yeah.
And I loved that. I love working with musicians and composers of music. And so this felt like a nice fit. And you weren't trying to nail me down and say, do this. You were saying, do what you think feels right. And then when my memory is, I can't remember where we recorded it now, but wherever it was a one take.
Really? Because it's 9 minutes long or something.
No, we did the voice.
That's
with
right,
one take, and then you or Raz was it that did he integrated my voice into your music, and it's amazing because as you said, it's a 9 minute long piece, and it seemed to fit just beautifully.
Your soul is not a bird.
I love that. I periodically go and play it just to remind myself how well it actually works.
Yeah, I think that's when you kind of know that what you've, you know, in collaboration, when you know you're kind of landed somewhere that works. Because I would actually, I don't really listen to an awful lot of stuff that of my own that I make, but I do go back to that, and it still never kind of, you know, upsets me. The work that I've put in, and in fact, when Raz and I first listened to it together, I remember we were kind of in bits, you know. We were like we were filling up, you know, and I mean that in the best possible, most un-narcissistic way possible, you know. And that was largely due to your contribution in the words, and I'm still pretty proud of that, you know.
But it's for me listening to it. It's a very, very relaxing piece to listen to, in spite of the fact that if you start listening to the words too closely, it's a bit disturbing. But the actual it's kind of like a dream, you know. It has that somnambulant kind of feel to it. So that was a nice thing to do. But that was a few years ago now.
Yeah, but it is. I mean, it still stands up. I listened to it on the train coming up. Your soul is not a bird a few times because it works in a cycle as well. So you can listen and listen. And it is very meditative. It does have that dreamy quality to it, but there's a lovely gentle drama as well. It builds and it builds. I remember playing it. I must have been on late night radio. I don't think I'd have got away with it during the day, all 9 minutes, but I do remember playing it on Radio Scotland one time, and we got so many lovely messages of people going, I just didn't want it to end. And it's lovely to have that time and that space without the restrictions. And like you say, it wasn't that Andrew said, right, we need this to be in a 3-minute pop banger. It can sometimes be good to have limitations in art, but sometimes the freedom's what you need.
Absolutely.
It's gorgeous. There's a line in it, "And your soul is not a bird. It is a sheet of paper." And I listened to that line and it kind of rung a little bit differently on the train up, because I was speaking to Andre Aciman last week, Call Me By Your Name among others. He's got a new memoir out. And he was talking about the fact that despite the fact he has written about so many people and places and times, and he's travelled all over the world in his life, and he's very content within his life, he only really feels at home on the page. And he said, I don't know, that's something I can't ever get away from. That kind of takes me home. And I wondered about that exploration of home in your music, because you've done it so much over the last few years, the landscape, the topography of Dundee, the memories of Dundee, the spaces and the buildings. It's all there, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's kind of... I'd love to say there was some extremely huge, considered deep meaning to it all, but I think... I don't know. I mean, I obviously was born and grew up in Dundee, and a lot of folk who I admire, look at their sort of surroundings and utilise that in their work, as well as the kind of nature and the kind of broader environment. But I guess you're just sort of always trying to understand yourself, and so you're sometimes looking out to the kind of more immediate things around you.
Yeah. Or what's not there as well, like you were saying, James, what's just hidden or what's just beneath is always fascinating too, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, those albums that you did, Andrew, that, where you are exploring, your own home city, but it's hinterland and everything. I mean, it seems to me that you didn't necessarily go into it saying, I know what I'm going to find out here. So that's they all feel like a process of exploration and discovery.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's also because I'm generally working alone, that you're... I never have that kind of luxury of having an ensemble and a room that you can be like, right, let's, we'll know where we're at sonically and emotionally in an hour, or something, so you're kind of, I'm, 95% of the time fumbling around, in the dark, and you're kind of moving blocks and shifting them and taking them away and putting them back in, putting them in the bin, pulling it out and saying, It was there all along.
Yeah.
The door ajar into this idea was there all along, and within that, you have that kind of exploration, I think.
That to me is, you've just sort of defined what artistic activity is, and I think all of us, whether we're musicians or writers or anybody else really, in working creatively, it's fumbling in the dark, and as you say, putting things out, taking things out, putting things back in again. Going, actually it was better the first time around or the fifth time around, and then finally you're able to stand back a wee bit and you realise that you don't even necessarily say that's it, finished. You say that's as good as I can possibly get it, and then maybe leave it and then go back to it again and say no, just tweak it a tiny amount.
Yeah.
And I don't. And again, that's why I was saying I love working with musicians, particularly if I'm working in the studio with them, because musicians have this ability to take something from 0 + 1 to 5 or 6 in 2 takes. It's unbelievable when you watch as a writer. Most of, as you say, I work on my own all the time. But when you watch a group of musicians that actually really, really get on together, and you see how they can raise the level of what they're doing in the space of 20 minutes, it's absolutely amazing.
It's a magic trick.
I'm totally envious.
Quite. And it's a wonderful thing to see, but also I love the fact that you ask all these questions of yourself and pull things apart, and only to find the answer was there all along.
Yeah. I mean,
have faith in that. You have to a bit, don't you?
Yeah. At the end of every project, I'm kind of like, I've no idea how I did that.
Yeah, me too.
But that's not particularly useful, because you're like, okay, maybe I'm making a record. How do you do that again? I'm really not sure.
Absolutely. I've written 7 novels and I still don't know how to do it.
Starting from scratch every single time.
Pretty much.
That idea of home, though, called to mind your Pilgrimer project as well, James, where you reimagined Joni Mitchell's Hejira in Scots, and you sort of transposed a map of home over songs from elsewhere. I was particularly thinking about Joni's Down and Out in Memphis, Tennessee, becoming Down and Out in Old Dundee.
Yeah, I mean, that was a wonderful project, working with Corinne Polwitt and her brother, and lots of other wonderful musicians and wonderful singers as well. And we had the absolute luxury of having the late Rod Patterson do that particular song for us when we did it at Celtic Connections, the show, and Rod stole the show, really. He just nailed that particular song, and then the one they did at the end as well. But yeah, that was a beautiful thing to be able to just take something that I totally love, Joni's travels across North America, and recast it in a way that was not detracting from what she'd done, but just saying, maybe I can do something different that honours that as well. Honours the work of a really, one of the very, very greatest artists of the 20th century.
Yeah, I think what I loved about it was that something can absolutely be two things at once and then greater than the sum of its parts. That really made me think about that particular project, So you had Hejira and you had we had your life, really, because it was actually quite intimate writing from your perspective, wasn't it?
It was, and it kind of, I don't normally open up like that, but I did because I had to. And it made me think very much about, the first time I'd listened to her album, Hejira, and then when the first time I'd left the British Isles and went to America and was hitchhiking around pretty much and doing the same sort of thing that she had been doing 3 years earlier, but without at that point really knowing that album. So yeah, it was a exploration of me and my life, and from 30 years earlier, and what had happened ever since. So I would say it was.
It was
it was a good thing. It was a good thing.
I was lucky enough to see two very different performances at it, because we did a conversation, didn't we, at Celtic Connections as part of it, and then again we did an event at Edinburgh International Book Festival, more stripped back. Really lovely to hear the songs again. And I remember us emerging from that very room and then going straight across the site to the Spiegel tent where Liz Lockhead and the Hazy Janes and Steve Ketley were all playing together. It was a magical night, and there you guys were. That was some evening.
Yeah, that was fun. I'd almost partially forgotten about that.
Yeah.
How could I? Yeah, playing Liz is always such a joy.
It just felt like a continuation of that celebration of music and poetry,
music and words coming together,
didn't
and different folk bringing their particular energies and expertise to make something new.
Yeah.
And you're right. I mean, Liz has been she's been working as I had been with Mull Historical Society in the same way.
You were at the book festival this year,
And again, I feel so privileged when I get to work with really great musicians and composers and so on, because it's not something that's usually available to a writer, but it's a brilliant thing to do. I love it. I love it.
But it is something you've done quite a bit of with James Robertson and with Liz. How did that then come about?
Well, I mean, it kind of feels like all roads lead to Michael Mara in a sense, and
we're getting towards them as we speak.
I mean, it was through Michael. Michael and Liz had worked together extensively over the years, and I think we'd met Liz a few times, and then after Michael's passing, we'd spoken about doing something together. So the Hazy Janes had worked with Liz, and then Liz and I made an EP together in the same room in Tobermory with Gordon MacLean, that the Hazy Janes and Michael Mara made the House Room EP. It's a really significant place and man and room. Yes, we made that in a Mull together. We actually got trapped by the weather when we made that, so it kind of made it all the more kind of like poignant.
Yeah, quite an adventure in itself.
Yeah, so Liz and I, we've kept in touch and hung out quite a lot, and it's what a blessing to know her and to spend time with her.
Yeah, and she did mention him on stage that night, because this was around the time, I think, of The Light Comes Back, wasn't it? And again, Michael Mara just rings throughout that particular record. Steve Ketley, of course, great in it as well. And here we are all these years later with a new Michael Mara box set. Now, this is super exciting because you've just been given one as you came in the door. So we're going to do, I don't know how this is going to work on a podcast. We're going to do an unboxing. Michael Mara. So this is unreleased demos, quite a few of them, archive material, photos, notes, a can of mind, and a tin of Think So. What's on the front cover? Is it Frida Kahlo?
Yes.
Oh, is she in the Taybridge Bar? Of course she is.
Yeah, it's a collage of one of Michael's Frida pieces of art. It's it's kind of hard to sort of
It's
summarise.
beautiful. I can
Isn't
just
it?
see
It's
now.
just
Have you
beautifully
seen
made,
inside
isn't
this
it?
yet?
No, I've
Right.
never seen it. I've
Okay,
never
so
seen
now
it.
we're getting a poster, I think, sort of like a very nice limited edition. We've
print.
got art prints here. Wow.
A booklet of Michael's lyrics.
Lovely.
With his handwriting, making corrections and things on
Yes.
it. Yeah, very good.
Now,
Scrapbook.
I think this is Peggy, Michael's
goodness.
wife's scrapbook that she has all his cuttings from over the years. I mean, it is really
lovely is that?
such a thing of joy and
That's a
beauty.
proper little press cuttings book,
That's
isn't
beautiful.
it?
Well, when I was
Gorgeous.
working on writing the book about Michael, Peggy came round to our house and she said, right, here's some stuff for you to look at. Amongst the boxes and boxes of things she brought in with the 3 scrapbooks that she kept.
Oh,
so
that's
that
them.
is an
Oh,
absolutely beautiful reproduction of the
lovely.
ones
Yeah,
that
yeah.
I worked my way through when I was trying to get all the information together for writing Arrestus Moment.
Yeah.
So it's gorgeous to see that again.
Yes.
And to see it actually, and for us to be able to get our hands on it. It's a limited
Absolutely.
edition. There's vinyl in there, I'm guessing,
Yeah.
as well. What an incredible looking box set. But yeah, it does feel like a bit of an extension of. I love that I hold these books up on a podcast as if anyone can see it. Have you seen this, Andrew?
That's a thing of beauty. Look at that.
It really, really is Arrestus Moment. Gorgeous. But again, it's got aspects of scrapbooks. It's got the photographs. There we go. A can of Mind and a tin of Think So right
I
there.
think what Peggy and the family have done with the box, the new boxed set, is they've taken, as we always knew would be the case, that the books that I wrote, which is now, goodness me, is 7 years old.
Good grief.
We always knew and hoped and expected that would be the jumping off place for lots more things, because we knew there was a whole archive of stuff that Michael had
Yeah.
left that
Sure.
that nobody had had time to have a good look through. And Matthew Mara, I think, has been delving into
Yeah.
his musical archive, and I think that's where some of the recordings in there come from, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think it was just such a kind of massive, daunting task to trawl through so much stuff that it's only now they've kind of found that space to do that. But yeah, Matthew, he was in charge of that side of things, and I'm so proud of him, for putting that together.
Absolutely, because as you said, I mean, my understanding was that there are hours and hours and hours of Michael having recorded himself doing stuff, and,
Yes.
and presumably some of that is now coming to the surface and being heard
Yeah.
for the first time.
Exactly. Yeah, there's kind of loads of unreleased demos in there.
And
Fantastic.
how utterly lovely to be hearing his voice again, let alone hearing songs that we've not encountered before. Mentioning that day at Slester Gardens when the sort of opening of the V&A, and in between you guys playing and Gary Clark playing, and I think the Swiss family Robertson maybe played as
Yeah.
well, did they? So Diggy Bypond and the gang. But in between, they just had Michael Mara. They had a big screen and they were just like absolutely firing out all of his brilliant songs across the city. And my kids were younger at the time, so at one point I'd gone to get them sweets or something. And so I came back, I wasn't even in the park, and the whole city was just ringing out with his voice. And it kind of feels like it always does a little bit. He's always here, isn't he?
Aye.
Yeah.
It's a lovely thing. The mural up in Michael Corr's mural up in Lochie, round the
Yes.
corner from my dad. But I've opened your book at a page here, which is just
So lovely, James.
it says, one day you'll find Joni Mitchell and everything will be okay.
That's
Interestingly.
him speaking to Alice, I think, at that point, isn't it?
It's a lovely Alice,
Aye.
yeah. She's listening to Kylie Minogue.
aye.
And he goes, don't worry, you'll find your way. Alice, of course, in the Hazy Janes as well. But there's a wonderful bit of his handwriting here. You mentioned there's more in the box set, Andrew. Lyrics of Hermless. And at the bottom of it, you've rightly noted, he says, my contender for National Anthem of Scotland. And then he scores out the word contender, as he should.
Yeah.
That's when I first came across Michael Mara singing that song. I was a Deacon Blue aficionado and followed them everywhere in about 1991, and they took him on tour.
Yeah.
I think the first night, it was maybe in Edinburgh, I think, Playhouse, 2 nights at the Playhouse. I was at every gig. And of course, we were like teenagers, and we were like, who's this old guy coming on? What's that? What are we getting now? But we kind of trusted Ricky Ross's taste, so we knew it was going to be something. And honestly, one song in, we were utterly, I kind of forgot Deacon Blue were coming on.
Yeah.
The storytelling, the songs themselves, his voice, there was such a sadness in it, and there was such humour in it, and there was such warmth in it, all at the one time. And by the end of it, he had us all singing Hermless.
Brilliant.
So loads of us went to all the gigs, and the last one was in Hogmanay at Glasgow Royal Concert Hall. And I honestly think as many people sang as loud for that as they did for Dignity, you know?
Yeah.
It just means so much to so
Amazing.
many of us. I think, in fact, there's a bit in your book where Liz Lockhead says there was just utterly nobody like him. It was almost like this magic trick he had. So it was like larger than life, but completely innocuous.
Yeah.
And I think that's a perfect vantage point, isn't it, for the observations he made about Dundee and daily life.
He said Dundee's the perfect place to be an artist because you're looking at everything as the underdog.
That's so true. In a way, that's, it's like you're not necessarily looking for it, but it's all happening about you. But it makes you see things differently as well. His songs, I think, his observations made me see Dundee differently, see life differently.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That, to me, that's the biggest thing about his songs is that you think you know something about something, and then you listen to Michael and you go, I had never thought about that.
Yeah. And it's always from a place of kindness.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, and then, the song that perhaps exhibits that more than anything is Frida Kahlo's Visit to the Taybridge Bar. You know, he really clearly had huge empathy for her and her not altogether happy life and marriage and so on. But he thought, okay, let me think of a way to make her life better. So he takes it on. It's just a beautiful, beautiful song about a person that he obviously recognised as a beautiful person, and he just wanted to be kind to her.
Yeah, no, I do. I think that's absolutely lovely, and it's fitting that she is on the cover of that new box set. I bet you cannot wait to get that home, Andrew. I'll let you away soon so you can get the songs on, go through it. It looks like an absolute treasure trove. But let's touch on another vividly poetic man who spent a little bit of time in Dundee, not nearly as much, because you have a republished anthology of some of his works. Just in time. Tell us about Robert Ferguson.
This is
James.
Robert Ferguson, who lived from 1750 to 1774. So this year is the 250th anniversary of his death, which actually is on the 17th of October. So that's just in a couple of weeks' time, or less, actually.
Yeah.
And this is quite weird because back in the year 2000, I realised that there wasn't an easily accessible selected poems of his available. It wasn't in print.
Yeah.
So I put one together and we brought that out to mark the 250th anniversary of his birth. And it seems like yesterday, and that's an indication of what a short life he had. He was only there for 24 years, and he only wrote poetry for maybe 2.5, 3 of those years, and yet he turned out this amazing body of fantastically mature, witty, funny poetry. Nearly all, and he was an Edinburgh-born lad, but his parents came from the northeast, from Aberdeenshire, so he had access to all kinds of different aspects of Scotland's culture. He grew up as a city boy, just off the high street, but at that very, very moment when Edinburgh was the centre of the Scottish Enlightenment and things were beginning to change in the city, a bit like what we were talking about with Dundee earlier. The old town was too crowded and too big, so the gentry were moving out to the new town and to new buildings coming up on the south side of the city. But all the activity and action of Edinburgh in the 1770s was happening on the high street. And he captures that in these poems, and they're funny, they're ironic. He loves puncturing the sort of pomposity of magistrates and judges and all of those things, and he loves having a look at from the underside, a wee bit like Michael Marray. He's looking at life from the underside. And anyway, so that was we brought this book out in 2000. It's been in print ever since, and then I learned that the publisher it was about to go out of print this year, and I said, no, you can't, because they're going to be doing various things this year as well. So they brought it back into print, and which I'm really, really chuffed about. And it's about 40 of his poems. Nearly all of them are written in the vibrant, rich Scots that he spoke and used all the time, and they just capture Edinburgh life at this key moment in its history. But that in itself would be enough. But the really important thing about Ferguson, apart from the fact that he's a brilliant poem himself, is that he is. Without Robert Ferguson, we might not have had Robert Burns doing what he did, because Burns says that Ferguson is the person that turned me to writing in Scots and to writing in my own tongue and writing about the things that I didn't think I should write about.
I think he called him his brother in misfortune and his brother as a muse.
My elder brother in misfortune, by far my elder brother in the muse.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you can't get a bigger piece of praise from Robert Burns than that. And so Ferguson's important for his own work, but he's really important because Robert Burns takes so much from him, and
was he not at one point also cited? And by the way, I see this as a great thing as being a bit of a bad influence on. How could you be a bad influence on Burns, by the way?
Well, there was this tendency for both of them, you know, that they led dissipated lives. You know, I mean, Ferguson loved to have a drink and so on, and he had fits of depression. Actually, a bit like Burns as well. They had ups and downs. And so people thought, this is not the way, poets are supposed to be, noble, upstanding people, which is nonsense. I don't really know many poets who've been like that. But
no, they're certainly not very popular, I don't think, with good reason. They haven't lived.
But yeah, exactly. So I don't, Ferguson and Burns together, they are, they're absolutely huge figures in our literature and culture, and quite rightly so.
Yeah. I do love that within those poems, that collection alone, there is the satire, there is the really, really vivid, picturesque writing. I feel like I'm there. There's such humour, but there's a real vulnerability as well, right? It's not just all bravado or...
No, and you feel very much, with all the fact that he makes you laugh.
Yeah.
And he makes you laugh sometimes because he uses outrageous rhymes, you know, and just ridiculously outrageous rhymes. But all the way through, there's this sense that it could all come crashing down at any moment. He's very, very conscious of the fragility of life and the fragility of his own life, and the fact that so many people are living close to the line in terms of poverty and so on. He himself is right on the edge there a lot of the time. So yes, there's that poignancy and sadness underpinning the joy and the liveliness of the work as well. And of course, it all ends badly for him. He does go into a very, very dark place and dies. A cell in the madhouse, effectively. So it's a sad ending to his very short life, but we've got the poems, and the poems are so full of life that you kind of go, okay, it's a sorry tale in that respect, but you have to remember what he did with those few years that he had.
But that's why it's so vital to keep them alive, to keep the poems in print, to be having. I know there's a lot of events going to be happening in October to celebrate his life and his work, and of course we can see his statue down on the Canongate. Is it in a drink a clog? Is that how I pronounce the word? Is it a clog?
Drink a clog, I think
so,
or e-clog. That's a good question.
Yeah.
Actually, I should go and check it out. But,
Anyway, there's a particularly brilliant line in that, well, I love it. It's brandy and whiskey having a bit of a face-off, isn't it, about who's the most notorious and who's the better of the two. And Brandy calls whiskey a one-wordy gauk. I'm like, quite want that on a T-shirt. That's a fine. You can even just take a couple of the words and go, it's just making all language richer.
Absolutely. And because he's got that connection with the Northeast, and because he's listening to the policemen of that day, the city guard, who were mostly Highlanders, who had retired from the army and so on. He's got a really good ear for picking up the Doric and for picking up sort of slightly faux Highland accents, which is all in his poetry as well. And that's both funny, but also you kind of go, this guy's got a real ear. He really is listening all the time.
And absorbing it all
Absolutely, yeah. And you feel like I bet he would have been a lot of fun to have a night out with.
Oh, my goodness. One of those taverns. Absolutely. Never mind the coffee houses, straight to the taverns. James has said a few times that he really loves working with musicians for various reasons, the freedom of it, the magic of it, just seeing art coming to life in a different way. But you really have worked with quite a lot of writers. That's the flip side of it, Andrew. Is that something that for you is particularly inspiring? Because even in your instrumental work, the titles are so evocative and poetic in and of themselves.
Yeah, I guess it's the nature of collaboration as well. I mean, being pulled into kind of grey areas that you don't really fully understand what is happening, let alone where you might end up.
Or how it's happening.
Yeah. So I think that's always been of interest to me. And not really knowing what the end result's going to be necessarily. And I think I've kind of had that enjoyment from working with writers. Not really, I've kind of having a finish line that a place you want to be. You're just kind of like letting things being pulled, you know, left and right. And I suppose dealing with instrumental music, it's quite enjoyable to have, not necessarily kind of like verbose titles, but kind of just having kind of fun with words, I suppose. And I mean, a lot of the kind of pieces of work are about specific things, but there's I never really had that, afforded that kind of playful fun when I was kind of writing songs with words, you know.
Right, so that's come. And then what about when you're working with Tommy? So this is like the latest album at the moment. How did that work? What was the thought process there? Because I know sometimes you actually come up with something a bit more, if not conceptual, but you'll give yourself a working way rather than leaving it all completely open.
Yeah, I mean, it was fairly conceptual to begin with, Tommy and I's project. We were kind of centering it around the upright piano in my studio, and we were sampling kind of like various noises that the piano would make, like creaks and clangs, and kind of hitting it. And Tommy was taking those sounds away because he's an amazing musician as well as artist and a designer, and he was taking these sounds away and kind of building percussive loops and reverbs and things and kind of sending them back to me. And he also, it was kind of at the tail end of COVID, and he posted me these kind of beautifully packaged and designed instruction cards that had, I guess, kind of loosely based on Yoko Ono's
Like in a Fluxus?
Yes,
right,
yes.
Okay.
And, you know, with kind of playful instructions like if it's sunny outside, play it, you know, 32 BPM. If it's raining, play this tempo. If it's, you know, and that was just like a really curious and fun kind of jumping off point for these kind of ideas. And it kind of snowballed and developed into various other kind of like routes to take them, and that's kind of what wound up being Ash Grey and the Gull Glides On, and we worked with a writer on that as well, Aidan Moffat of Arab Strap. He contributed to the last song on the album, and you know, we've both been a fan of Aidan's work for years.
So it's still that idea, it's still that spirit of collaboration, isn't it?
Yeah, totally.
I do love that idea though, of having in a way these restrictions, if you like. So it's like, you know, you take the card and you respond to it. But you did that, I'm thinking about 365. So it's like the restriction there was you just got to do something every day.
You've got to do it every day, and then it's got to be the same length, the same number of words. And you know, you do need those boundaries sometimes in order to make a piece of art work. You know, if you didn't have any restrictions whatsoever, then it would be, you know, how do you sort of say, no, this is what it's got to be? So that was a framework which worked for that particular project. But I was thinking a wee bit, just when you were talking there, Andrew, about one of the things when I worked with Corinne Polwart particularly, was she made me think very, very hard about the difference between a poem and lyrics for a song.
Oh.
Because they're not the same thing at all. You know, the fact that, I mean, I thought when we started doing the Pilgrimer thing, I kind of thought, well, there's the poems that I've made from recasting Joni Mitchell's work. And then Corinne tried to say, well, actually they don't fit the music that we're going to, because we're using her tunes.
Yeah.
And what you've got is fine, but they don't actually fit when I'm trying to sing them. And that was for a whole range of reasons, including things like, you know, just the consonant mix wasn't right for the length of time she might have to hold a note or something like that. And I had never, ever thought about that because I'm not a singer as such. And but suddenly I was really had to be conscious of, and then she and I worked on that. So that, you know, by the time we got to the final version, you know, Corinne had put a lot of work into getting those lyrics right to be sung.
Yeah.
And so they had stopped being poems and they'd become song lyrics.
But there was a difference. There was a real distinction.
Oh, there was a total difference, absolutely. It was really fascinating, and I'd never really thought about that before.
When we worked with Liz, she had a kind of, I think, a similar enlightenment, or whatever you want to call it. Like, she had always wanted to, or for a long time wanted to, you know, toe dip into writing, you know, lyrics. So I think she got quite a kick out of that kind of development in her words when we were making the Light Comes Back with the Hazy Janes, because a lot of they had kind of like sung choruses and stuff. So it was really quite beautiful seeing Alice sing Liz's words and just seeing Liz's face light up, you know, as that kind of moment, you know, it just kind of clicks and you're like, okay, this is working. Seeing that transition and the transformation.
Yeah, I was listening to that this morning actually, because I think you'd put
I was listening to it last
posted
night,
up
yeah.
somewhere on
Yeah.
Facebook or whatever, and I had listened to it and I'd forgotten there's that beautiful bit which you I think had picked up on where Alice and the other voices, or maybe it's Alice recorded several times, but they come in right about
choral
4 minutes
swell.
into the song, or
Yeah.
this swell of music, and you just
I
you
know.
can feel yourself getting caught up in it emotionally. That's beautiful.
It is absolutely stunning, and it's got that timelessness as well, which is just.
It was an amazing thing to do. I mean, we worked so fast. That was all us just singing in the room together. You know, me, Alice, and Liam. Much like when we made the House Room EP with Michael in that room in Antobar with Gordon McLean, all very specific to the situation. All Michael's vocals on that House Room EP, they're all first take.
Yeah.
At the very most second take. So it's that spontaneity, I think, kind of seeps into the vibes.
It goes back to your collaboration with Art of the Memory Palace,
Yeah.
Robertson.
Yeah.
One take.
I suppose so.
So you've finished a tour, Andrew. We better let you get home to get to unboxing your Michael Manna box set. Are you off the road for a little bit, or when are you back on? Obviously, we can get your wonderful records.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of done for the time being. Tommy and I have just done a big 2-week tour promoting our record and visiting lots of places.
Fantastic. And what about you, James?
I'm busy all the time. I've got a novel on the go, which is I put it to one side just now. But another Edinburgh-based poet from the 20th century, J.K. Anand, he wrote mostly for children. He wrote these poems for bairns, and I don't know, maybe you might have even had them at school.
Yes.
The crocodile and
I know the crocodile. I can see the poster with J.K. Anand under it, kind of
so
in my mind. Yeah.
His books, his work's been out of print for a few years now, and as part of Ichiku, the Scots language project that Matthew Fitt, another Dundonian, and myself have worked on together, we've brought out a new selection of the best of J.K. Anand, illustrated by Bob Dewar, another Dundee connection, because Bob used to work for DC Thompson and various as a cartoonist.
You can
and so on.
see it in that. It's so alive, that image.
And it's the image on the front of because it's a poem about Nessie. But it's lovely, and we're hoping that J.K. Anand will be introduced to a new generation of bairns right throughout Scotland in the coming years. So I'm really chuffed
It's
that we've
so
got
important, but I do love that, whether that's the Gruffalo and Scots, or you've done so many of these giraffes canny dance, and my kids absolutely love them. Your wee one will probably be getting
I was
them
just
as
thinking,
well
I'm
now,
going to nick that
Andrew.
for
Or
my
you
bairn.
you can take that home and get your Scots language up to speed.
But
That's
that's
so
it.
easy.
At any age, whether it's people coming across Ferguson for the first time, probably walked past that statue how many times, and it was an unmarked grave, I think, in the in Canongate for a long time as well.
Until Robert Burns paid to erect a stone there. Yeah.
But you pass them and you don't know his words, or maybe J.K. Anand's getting forgotten about a little bit. Reading them and saying them and carrying them is so important.
Absolutely.
You know, that goes through all of it. Okay, well, I'm going to learn some new poems. I'm going to come and have another little look at the Michael Manna box set, which looks absolutely lovely. It's been amazing being in the V&A Dundee, though, so thank you so much, and thank you so much for coming on.
You're very welcome.
Thanks, Nicola.
Cheers.